Hello and welcome to the Keep It Local Maine podcast, where we tell the stories of local business owners and Maine residents and learn more about what they do, who and what inspires them, their challenges, successes, and more.
My name is Kimberly Rigolinski.
And I'm Todd Rigolinski.
And we are the publishers of Keep It Local Maine, a local magazine that helps to showcase local businesses to the people in and around their communities. Thank you for tuning in to our weekly podcast that you can subscribe to on Podbean, Apple Podcast, and Spotify. You can learn more about us at keepitlocalmaine.com and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram through the links in the show notes.
Our guest this week is songwriter, producer, multi-instrumentalist, and podcaster Spencer Albee. He was the keyboard player for Maine's own Rustic Overtones before releasing his debut album, Frankenstein Presents the Popsicko Volume 1, in 2000. Since then, he's had several musical projects like Rocktopus, As Fast As, Spencer and the School Spirit Mafia, Space vs. Speed, and his current collaboration called Bell Systems. And all that in addition to recording on his own. He is the creative host behind the yearly Beatles Night in Portland with an all-star band, and Rolling Stone magazine has referred to him as a 21st century master in the lost art of Beatlesque hooks. Oh, and he also hosts a weekly podcast called Spencer and Zack Explore the Universe with fellow musician and one of our previous guests, Zack Jones. Welcome to the show, Spencer.
Yes, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
This is great.
It is a pleasure. So you do have a new album out.
It's true.
And the prior album to this, which actually is 20 years old, the Popsicko, now Volume 1, I guess we have to call it.
Well, it was actually, that was the title.
Oh, that's right. I forgot that.
Yeah.
I was listening to it earlier and I missed that part.
Yeah, that's great.
So this one is called the Popsicko Volume 2. How did you decide to make a sequel to an album 20 years later?
Well, I just started recording here in my house because I don't know if I don't want to bring your listeners down, but there's a bit of a pandemic on right now.
Oh, there is?
Yeah,
I hadn't noticed.
Yeah. So there's a lot of anxiety surrounding that, and so I just started making music as a pleasant distraction, and then it was brought to my attention that it was 20 years ago that the Volume 1 was released, and the reason it was Volume 1 was because I was in a band. I was in Rustic Overtones at the time, and it was just kind of like a put out a record for the sake of making a record. It wasn't like this is my new thing, necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
So I made like a Volume 1. Like I was picturing myself in Rustic Overtones sustainably for a period of time, and I just kind of occasionally dropped these Popsicko, volumes. In fact, the first Rocktopus record was all the original CDs and mix tapes and all that stuff are labeled Volume 2.
Huh.
But that ended up being the first Rocktopus record because all of a sudden there was no Rustic, and I was like, well, okie doke. I guess
This is now its own thing.
I guess I'm going this way.
Right on.
And so that's how this one got to be Volume 2. It was just because make a record for the sake of making a record, not really worried about like how I'm going to go out and play it, or just no other considerations than the noise I was making.
So it must have been that must have been almost therapeutic too, just kind of as this season that we're in going through, this pandemic and COVID. Did you feel like there wasn't a lot of pressure there? Like you just,
Yeah, like what are they going to do? Take away my shows?
Exactly.
Yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
What are shows? I forget. What is that again?
I miss shows.
I know I have a vague recollection. It's more of like it's like a sense more than a memory.
Yes.
Yeah, it really is. So is your songwriting process, is it different than it was 20 years ago? And if so, how has it changed or how is it the same?
It would have to be different, 20 years. Mm-hmm. Actually, going back and listening to it, there are a lot of similar. I was, in a lot of ways, pretty fully formed as a younger person. I think that I'm able to play what I hear in my head better now than I was back then. Like I'm a better player, but I feel like compositionally, like I'm kind of, not fundamentally that's in a similar space. I listen to some of like my older songs. I'm like, oh, not bad. Like, like, that's not bad for somebody who doesn't know what they're doing at all. But yeah, so in that way, it's kind of the same. I don't have a singular approach to writing songs. It can either be just starts with drum and bass, just kind of get like a vibe going on kind of thing, or which I guess that would be the case with Is That Paul Newman off the new album. That was just started off as like a bass and drum thing, which turned into a whole song. or the first track or second track, I guess, Love's Not Lost. That was definitely like me charging myself with, sit down and write a song right now, young man. And so, yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yeah, absolutely.
So when I was mentioning this to Kim earlier, because I had a chance to listen to the whole album kind of front to back today, and in that song, is that Paul Newman? Did I hear a little bit of Three Dog Night kind of in the outro of that?
Well, it's that Wurlitzer electric piano.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It almost sounded like that, Mama Told Me Not to Come.
Same vibe, same instrument.
Yeah.
Might even be the same key. I don't know. I can't confirm that, but yeah, that's the vibe. That's that kind of, you can't touch that instrument without kind of recalling Three Dog Night or Supertramp.
Yeah, that's the one I hadn't actually thought of.
Or Ray Charles, but I tell you what, I don't play like that guy. He's pretty good.
Nobody really does. They gave him the nickname Genius for a reason, I think.
Yep. I can't touch that.
Absolutely.
What was your musical upbringing like? And here I'm kind of thinking of early influences and how and when you knew that music was something that you were interested in and that you wanted to do kind of for your lifetime.
Well, I was always musical. Turns out my parents got me like the little kids musical play set, and I went bananas on that thing. My parents also exposed me to a lot of music from a very early age, like really young. I had my own record player. I had my own record player until I decided that it was a potter's wheel. Because I was watching.
How'd that work out?
Well, I'm actually kind of surprised I didn't get electrocuted because it was definitely a plug-in-the-wall record player. I was definitely using water on my Play-Doh.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. But yeah, they had records by the Supremes, the Platters, Rubber Soul. I had a copy of Rubber Soul. I had Peter and the Wolf, Henry Mancini, 101 Strings. So I had like a lot of. Actually, all those influences I just mentioned are pretty much like where I'm at right now.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's so cool.
And my dad, he wouldn't call himself a singer, but I would. He's got a really lovely voice, and he used to sing a lot. He loves singing, though he never did it in any sort of professional capacity. And my mother's father was a vaudeville musician. There's actually you can YouTube the Lemire twins and see he and his brother. They're not actually twins, although they do look very similar. They look similar in the way that everybody in 1938 looked the same, But it's like old newsreel footage of them playing banjos together with their father, my great grandfather, who built at that point the biggest banjo in the world. And it's he's not a good player. But it was big. I'll give him that. And then he would play with me as a kid, like sit me on his knee and let me strum the banjo, and he'd fret, like Sesame Street songs and that kind of stuff. And then my first grade teacher had a piano in the classroom, and I gravitated towards that. And then we had a great music teacher in elementary school who, taught us fundamentals of music, but then we'd close the each class, someone would get to pick out a 45 or bring in a 45 and play it. So we were also cool. Listening to current music. I also took piano lessons from her, and my parents got me a piano, and then I kept taking lessons, kept playing, and then I stopped taking lessons because it was no fun, and I started again, and I stopped, and I had a great music teacher in middle school who really pushed all of us really hard. And then when I get to high school, we didn't have the best teachers. They were kind of like tenured and just like whatever, Yeah. But we had a lot of great musicians in our class because of all the great music that we'd had up to that point. So we kind of motivated ourselves at that point. And then I started taking lessons again because I decided I wanted to go to school for music. It was either music or special makeup effects, and I chose music. And yeah, I know.
Special makeup effects.
What made you think special makeup effects?
I was into like horror movies and stuff.
Okay.
I was obsessed with a fellow named Tom Savini, and I used to, just like buy my own like liquid latex and make masks and stuff like that. And,
oh wow,
that's awesome!
So
I
cool.
never would have thought to do.
In
that.
retrospect, I might have maybe I should have gone with special makeup effects because people are apparently still employed doing that. But so that's I crushed piano lessons and kind of like learned how to read music and auditioned for USM. To which, when I finished my audition at USM, the head of the jazz department who I was auditioning for said, "Well, that was loud." And
oh, jeez.
That was sweet. And then, I just met Dave Noyce there from Rustic. And then he pretty much the summer, he basically said if I got a Fender Rhodes, I could be in the band. So that summer I got a Fender Rhodes. And I called him. He's like, great. And he said, yeah, come on up to Granny Killam's, which is where the Big Easy used to be, on Market Street in Portland, Maine. And so he had me show up for that. And none of the band knew I was coming. And it was really embarrassing. And there I was, like, out in front of their rehearsal spot with my car full of gear, like playing John Roods, the bass player, a tape of me playing over their stuff. And they had no idea I was coming.
Oh my gosh.
And Dave Noyce, like, rolled up, like, last minute. And he's like, oh yeah, I thought maybe Spence could sit in with us today. And they're like, okay. Then I was so mortifying, but yeah, then I was in the band, and the rest is on Wikipedia.
That's so cool.
Do you think that he might have done that a little bit on purpose?
I think he 100% did that on purpose.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Because that sounds like just one of the best jokes ever, as long as you're not the one standing there.
Yeah.
Well, I think
with everybody staring at you.
I think Dave knew that he wanted me, or at least those vintage keyboards, in the band. I think he knew that, or maybe both. And I think that rather than deliberating with everybody and trying to pass it by committee, he just made it happen. And he kind of had that faith, like, well, the kid will fly or he won't.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and it worked ish for a while.
As everything in music does, or it doesn't.
That's a good story.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite process as far as songwriting, recording, producing, mixing, or performing? What would you say is your kind of favorite process?
My favorite part of the whole thing is writing and recording and producing are kind of one thing to me. I love making a song and recording that and, like, trying to make the production, the song work. That's like a fun puzzle for me. And, like, when you actually succeed in not only, like, putting the puzzle together, but, like, cutting the pieces as well,
Yeah.
It's just like a problem to solve, and I love it. And it's my favorite part of the whole thing. And I would have, this time last year, I'd been like, yeah, performing, whatever. But now that I don't really get to do it, I realize how much I miss it.
Yeah. So. I can see that. So when you look at Popsicko Volume 1 and Volume 2, and you kind of look at them side by side, and I was thinking this today as I was going through Volume 2, and Volume 1 is, hey, it's right there above it in my iTunes. Do you look at the two of those and see any similarities, or are you just like, well, it's just, are they distant cousins? They, twins? How do you look at that?
I just feel like it's kind of the approach on both of them was kind of the same. That's the similarity. It's like they're both pretty eclectic collections of songs, and they're both made with, because I'm in a band right now, so I'm not trying to, like, I don't know, I wasn't planning on making a record. I just made a record because I had a record in me to make, and so I just approached it with that kind of mindset of, like, just let it be what it is. Like, don't. There's one point where I thought, like, oh my God, I'm making a Steely Dan record. And then,
not a bad way to go.
No, but like, but then it kept, like, changing and morphing, and new songs would be added, and it just kind of ended up being the big kind of comfort food smorgasbord that it is.
Yeah, I was very, like, when the overture came on, my first thought was, and I hope this isn't upsetting, but I was like, this sounds like yeah, it'd be really awkward. I was like, this sounds like the opening to, like, the coolest John Carpenter movie ever.
I'll take it. And that's definitely where my brain was at. Like, they're hanging out around, like, The Thing or Blade Runner, and in fact, I'm using those keyboards. So you are not wrong.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So
boy,
cool.
That would have been weird.
I hate John Carpenter.
Oh,
just kidding.
Dang it.
Just kidding.
Oh, well.
The Thing is one of my top 3 favorite movies.
Wow. Well, I guess I can also see where the whole, special makeup effects would have come out of something like that
I was
as well.
obsessed with that, and I still am. I watched that, and I borderline clap every time because it's so over the top. Like it's just such an accomplishment in absurd disgustingness.
Now, when you have a project or an album or something like this, do you find yourself kind of gravitating? Like, do you have a favorite song or couple of songs off of the new album, or is it all just like, nope, they're all kind of equal to me?
It changes, definitely. Like I think probably some favorites on the record, but it's more like after it's done and you kind of like listen to it as a completed body of work that you can I can kind of see them as like individuals rather than, you know what I mean? Like as you're making it, you're just trying to make it successful. And each song kind of hopefully would give you, as you're making it, would give you like the, ooh, I'm onto a thing, kind of gives you like, you get the buzz, like, okay, cool, I'm doing something. But yeah, I don't know if you're asking me like if I have favorites off the new album
or just any album. I was wondering because I know that I figured it would be kind of that rotational thing where, well, sometimes I like these songs and then I hear something different in these songs, even though you kind of are the one who produced them. I was just curious how that would work from a standpoint of, I did all of this, and how would you feel about that? That's more the question, I guess.
Yeah. I don't know. It is because like this record specifically, I did save for like the handful of guest spots and the spit shine that Wyman put on it. I did all of it, so like I know where all the skeletons are buried. But I find listening back to older stuff, there was a point in my career or whatever you want to call this thing I do, where I'm happy with all of the songs on the record. Like if I listen back to Rocktopus, I'm not unhappy with that, but there are definitely moments where it's like, oh, that's dumb. It just sounds like a dumb guy doing dumb things. But then there are moments where it's like, okay, like, that's you're on your way. But I think that by the time I hit, I don't know, maybe Destroy the Plastic Man, maybe Open Letter to the Damned, the indie Open Letter to the Damned, I can listen down to those records and not want to delete certain songs.
Yeah, the consistency piece I would think is kind of the tough part there. Because as someone who writes, I'll definitely look back at things that I wrote and I'm like, ooh.
Yeah, why?
Whoa, should I delete that or should I keep that as an artifact to remind myself that I need to keep working harder?
Yeah. Yeah.
What to do.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just curious. So how do you feel that you've evolved as an artist over the last 20 years?
Well, I think I've gotten better as a musician, as a player. And you know how when like, okay, you get your own apartment and you start cooking, you're cooking your food for yourself all the time. And then you go to, wherever you go to Target and you get yourself like a spice rack. And then you make some chicken. You use like everything in the spice rack, like, cause you have it. And then maybe down the line, you might just be like, nope, just salt and pepper is enough.
Right.
So that kind of like learning how to not overdo it, not have it be everything in the kitchen sink. And if it is going to be everything in the kitchen sink, like really making sure, there's a space for everything. Or that you're making kind of like an orchestral sound together, in Congress. But I just said that like Moira Rose. In Congress.
That was a nice moment. I like that.
Yes.
Adds a bit of class to our podcast.
The way she approaches, I don't know how they get any takes on that show. Between Moira and David and Alexis, it's just they're all so ridiculous. On Schitt's Creek, it's unbelievable. But yeah, just like learning some restraint, I guess, and also having, like maybe if I was younger, I would have like a whiskey ginger or some sort of like drink. But now I'm just like, no, just the whiskey's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, just like let it breathe, let it do its thing. It's enough.
That's a great analogy. It
Yeah.
really is.
That's the one. They're all going to be crap from here on out.
Well, at least we know what we're in for.
Yep.
You know,
it's a good life lesson right there.
Yep.
Even. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, after a while, you start appreciating things for kind of what they are instead of like how much stuff I can add into them.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
Either that or I'm just getting really lazy and I don't want to add stuff to things anymore.
But also like maintaining that, like, you know, like, you could never put those two ingredients together. You know, unlike cooking, there are certain things that like pretty unequivocally are gross, you know. But with music, I love I always try to do something that's how do I phrase this? Like why would you do that? That sounds so nerdy, or just like, and I love that. And it ends up like not sounding that nerdy because it works. But you know, I don't know. If it makes me laugh, then I keep it in.
It's awesome.
Well, it's always a good way to go. Laughter is important. I think it also covers over a multitude of sins sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, I also am one to use like laughter. Like if I get like bad news, I'm like, oh, that's terrible, you know. I'm
gonna try that from now on.
Or if something's just so awesome, I laugh usually. Yeah. So
Laughter's good. Laughter's really good.
Laughter's key.
Yeah. Quick question regarding kind of just those combining of ingredients, because it just kind of brought to mind last year's Dave Noyes tribute show at State. Was that it was last year? Or was that actually the beginning of 2020? Because time has no more meaning anymore.
No, it was last year.
Okay, I didn't know if I was losing my mind more than usual.
No. It's like it's so hard to keep tabs on the passage of time right now because it's
absolutely
deleted year.
I know.
Yeah, but I remember that being something that a couple of the guys from Rustic had talked about, just how Dave was kind of had these eclectic musical tastes, and that, you know, and especially I thought the set that you performed with Rustic was great because it wasn't like the very poppy sort of things. It was kind of the weirder songs, and I appreciated the fact that, you know, that was what y'all were going for. Do you take any of that kind of eclecticness, if that's actually a word, from, you know, knowing Dave back in the day, or where does that come from? Is that just something that you've kind of built up over the years?
I mean, Dave Noyes definitely hipped me to a lot of cool stuff, you know. So the way we met was, as I said, at USM, and every Friday after there's basically, I think it's called recital class, but the whole music department would be in the same room together in Corthell Hall, and we would watch our peers perform. And then after that, we would go back to our dorm room and drink all the coffee and just listen to stuff. At that point, I remember, like, you know, being like, you know, really into Fish at the time, and he'd be like, "Yeah, cool," and then he'd play like Frank Zappa, like, cause like, oh, you know what I mean, like, like, you like this, but this is where this comes from, kind of vibe. So yeah, he hipped me to a lot of we listened to a lot of jazz too, because we were also like in music school together at the time, so it was also kind of a joint period of discovery. I've always had eclectic taste in music, and certainly when you get together with somebody like Dave Noyes, who has like it's almost like he's like a library, you know. And I mean, my record collection, it's not obviously the same as Dave's because I have different tastes than he did, but there's a lot. I can pull out certain records and be like, oh yeah, Dave hit me to that, you know. And I, you know, who knows, maybe I hipped him to some things as well.
Yeah,
you know, or just anybody in that group. That there's a lot of really great musical heads in that group. I could think of each member of that, you know, that band, that lineup, and for the most part, say like that person turned me on to this, you know.
Yeah.
So cool.
It's always good when you can kind of pick those things out and attribute them back to, you know, relationships that you've had, you know, kind of this little musical or, you know, cultural family tree.
Yeah. So cool.
Well, Geneviève, my partner in Bell Systems, we were talking this morning, and she said that she was on a Sade kick I was like, oh, I'm so happy for you, because I actually remember there was a period of time when Rustic was like, it was like all Sade all the time. I don't know what happened, but I think she had a new record out at that time. And so we just got into like, it was just Sade for days, for months, and I can think of like, I can definitely think of, there are records that a band, a certain person might be into. Like, for instance, like within the context of Rustic Overtones, Tony and I were into Ben Folds 5, and it was only Tony and I, but we'd listen to it. Everybody had a chance to kind of listen to their thing, but then like, eventually like certain things would get voted off the island because it just drove somebody. You don't want to drive people crazy,
Yeah.
But those albums that kind of passed muster for everybody, and there's I should make that list because there was certainly like a handful of, there's like, Tom Waits' Bone Machine, Los Lobos' Colossal Head, Ron Sexsmith, Other Songs. There's a Brand Nubian album that we listen to all the time. KRS-One. Yeah, they're just like certain records that could just be played. Oh, De La Soul, Stakes is High. Those definitely make me think of that, being in that van with everybody.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
So a little kind of thing that I always listen for in music, and I'm guessing this might be a thing that you at least pick out as well.
Probably not.
I like.
I'm just kidding.
I'm trying to be professional, but you found me out.
We're supposed to be professional. I'm sorry.
But I like to look for kind of those weird things that you'll find in a recording, and for instance, like listening to old James Brown albums, you can hear like you can hear the kick pedal squeak.
Yes, I love that.
In a bunch of so one of my favorite ones is.
Good.
This is from Rustic Overtones' last show at the State, last with air quotes around it, and it somehow wound up on Internet Archive or whatever, and a friend of mine burned that for me, and I listened to it until I wore the CDs out. But at the beginning of Pop Trash, as the drums are starting in, someone yells out, "Where's one?" So
it was so funny,
and I laugh every single time because at first I was like, "Oh, that's kind of funny," and then I'm trying to count it, and I'm like, "I don't know where one is either. I wouldn't have any.
Where's
any
one?
Clue." Yeah. So, do you have any moments like? Well, actually, first of all, was that you yelling that? Do you think
it very well could have? That sounds like me.
But the other thing is like, what would be some of your favorite moments like that from recordings that just kind of you're like, oh yeah, I always hear that, or that always gives me a good laugh or something.
Well, one of my favorite records is Paul McCartney's Ram, and I love that album because I put it up against all of the Beatles catalog. I think it keeps pace with the Beatles, which is not. It's rare for post Beatles albums to do that, just because. You had three amazing songwriters in one group. But I love that album because it's so well recorded, but it's also, there's mistakes and just rawness to it, and they don't trim the endings, and you know what I mean? Like it's not dressed up. So to me, it's like a hybrid between Abbey Road and the White Album. And I love all the little squeaks and tape edits and all that stuff. But if I were to cite my two favorite errors or whatever on recordings, Philip Glass's Glassworks is a favorite of mine, and I think it's called I'm terrible with song titles, but it's this kind of, it can be kind of bombastic and repetitive, and there's synthesizers and woodwind instruments, and so it's a mix of like modern and neoclassical, whatever you'd call it, probably new classical. But you can hear, it's such a meticulous recording, but there's this one point where you can hear someone's like foot slide on the ground. It's like, oh yeah, these are people in a room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they probably hated it. The engineer's like, they probably like, the cellist got like yelled at, like, you ruined the recording, but it's like, it's my favorite part. And there's also, remember when that Bob Marley Legend compilation came out in the 90s?
Yeah.
Like the album that everyone has a copy of.
Oh yeah.
Yep. It's just like,
it was like the 90s Frampton Comes Alive. Like somehow everybody has a copy of it, and no one knows where it came from.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, talk about a greatest hits, right? Like one of the greatest hits, and the version of No Woman No Cry on that album is live, and it's I think it was recorded at the Roxy in Los Angeles, if I have my facts right. But my favorite part of that is they play, and they just sound incredible. They're just in it. They're playing great, they're sounding great, and then all of a sudden there's just like this little bit of feedback, and you can hear the sound guy like take it away. It's like, oh yeah, this is live. My band sucks. You know?
Yeah. I forgot about that one. Yes, I remember hearing that now because in college you heard that every dorm room that you walk past. At least it was either that or Dave Matthews Band. I mean, that's one of the two.
Or for at least in my dorm, it was that Maceo Parker's Live on Planet Groove.
Oh my gosh,
that was a big one. And that was kind of like, I mean, I knew who James Brown was. But that Maceo Parker album was like really my introduction into the James Brown universe, the extended universe, you know, getting past just like, I think at that point I had Star Time or something like that box set.
We hope that you've enjoyed part 1 of our conversation with Spencer Albee, and be sure to tune in next week when we bring you part 2, where we talk more about music and other things. Be sure in the meantime to check out his new album, the Popsicko Volume 2. It's on streaming platforms everywhere. You can also get physical copies on CD and vinyl at Bull Moose music stores. Be sure to follow him on social media and at his website in the links in the show notes, and we will see you all next week.